Hello, my name is Leo DeBrock from Counselor's Choice Award. I'm going to go over with you how to create a type of CE course that is a little bit different than a lot of other options that there are. This one is going to go over more of a question and answer, almost an interview type course, where it's a really good tool for being able to go into a deep dive into a small specific subject. These courses are typically only about an hour at a maximum, 2 hours, so they're really meant to be concise, dense pieces of information. I'm going to go through this template so you can kind of see and understand how and what this would do in order to be able to achieve this goal. So for starters, you'd have your title page, you'd have a subtitle, which is optional, but then of course you need to have your full name there and the credentials. So an example of this from a course that I have, Understanding ACT, and then you can see my name and then behind my big loafy head there, some of the credentials. From there, you can go ahead and then put in your bio. That would be the next part to this. Bios have to include certain things. Some of them are your full name, your credentials and licensure information, your work experience, including how long you've worked, your place of highest education, and any other relevant. So in other words, the whole point of this is to be able to help people understand the lens that you're coming from things. Everyone has a bias. You need to be able to help them understand your experiences that are making up your thing that you're teaching based off of where and how you learned this different material. You don't have to include contact information if you're not comfortable, but this would be one of the places to put it. You can kind of see mine is a little bit wordy and a little bit lengthy. It doesn't need to be that long. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And you can kind of see it has all of those different things, including experience and duration and such. So for that, then comes the disclaimers. Now, this part is one that is required for accreditation purposes, but essentially it needs to have some of that information that I've put there at a minimum. But overall, the idea here is that the course, in order to be accredited, has to have some. So if you forget to do it, that's okay. You already have a recording for something that you forgot to do it. You can just add that on at the beginning or end, or let us know, and we'll be able to add it on through one that we record ourselves. One thing that's very critically important is unrelated material related to self-promotion can be presented at the end, but it cannot count towards the licensure time spent or hours. So in other words, if your course is an hour and a half and you spent 15 minutes of it talking about your own self-promotion or your own books or something, it's not an hour and a half, then it's an hour and 15 minutes of CE courses. So that part doesn't count. And on top of that, it can't be 15 minutes. It can't technically be more than 5 minutes as well, and it would have to be kind of at the end. So that to say, this is kind of my own version of the disclaimer as well. Any conflicts of interest, etc., are all on there. Then comes the objectives. There's a minimum of 3 objectives that you have to have, but one for every additional hour after that. They need to be specific. So the best way to be able to make sure it's meeting that requirement, the learner will be able to blank. And then from there, you can see my examples for that. And comes the introduction page. This isn't necessarily required, but it's a really good formatting because it lets the learner know that, hey, the disclosure, the lawyer is out of the room. Like, let's get into the material itself. And ideally, you're hitting this slide well within 5 minutes and not much longer for doing your own introduction so that you can get right into the material, the thing that people came there for. Here's kind of my introduction to this. And then comes areas of focus. So ideally, you rather than listing all of those objectives, you summarize them in just a couple of words so people can follow along. For these kind of courses, I always recommend the last one being the research, and you'll kind of go over that as well. So the first objectives, you can see my example slide here, is going to kind of look like this. You're going to have the name of that from that original slide that you just had, and then you start to have, oops, sorry about that. You're going to start to have these, what they're called objective slides. So basic questions, things like that. What is ACT? What is an example? All of these questions that seem pretty straightforward, and you should be able to answer them with your dialogue. I mean, you're the expert in the area. You should know, sort of generally speaking, what are some of the questions. I've got some examples in the previous slide for questions you might have. Then comes the next line of questionings, more to do with the areas of problems, like what people get wrong or misunderstand, what is culturally or ethically relevant, things like that, for the next sort of set of questions. And a lot of people worry, oh, I don't have enough questions. It might not, take me very long to get through all those. How am I supposed to fill a whole hour? If you're an expert in that area, you're probably not going to have that much of a hard time being able to find things and important details to be able to talk about. And more importantly, when you're getting to it, then comes this next aspect, which is the either a video that you can talk about that has to be short, no more than like 8 minutes. You could do a case example, a case study, something that, of course, if it's something that is a client of yours, you'd have to change names, details, and things like that. But then also there's the option of giving a graphic, something that you can people can really sink their teeth into to help understand the material at a different level. So there's a few different ways to do it. You could do all three depending on how long you want it to be, or just one. That allows you to be able to get into the material a little bit different methodology than just sort of the back and forth talking about those common questions. So for my particular example, I use this graphic that in the interview you would kind of be going into how and why it fits together in this context, explaining what we're seeing here. And then comes the last section, research. So ideally, you're going to need to have 2 to 3 APA formatted citations for these, and then you're going to have these be primary sources. But ultimately, what type of research should you find? There's usually a lot of research in the area that you probably want to teach. Find ones that answer the best questions, if that makes sense. So, in other words, here's my example. Does it work? Right? That is the question that this piece of research answers. And I prefer meta-analyses and systematic reviews because those are usually the most robust. And just for good measure, I've got a second one there as well. Then comes a different question as a summary of the research. So here's sort of another one. What about internet-based? Right? What does the research say on using this in an internet-based? And I've got another study. And what you'll notice is that this one as well is from 2021. So they all have to be within the past 10 years. Or excuse me, they don't all have to be, but you need to have at least 2 or 3 that are within the past 10 years. So the other ones don't count towards that particular accreditation requirement. And then comes different questions, a summary of the research. You can, if you want, sort of go through these and read it line by line if you want, but I really don't recommend that. Ideally, you really don't need to go through into that amount of depth. You really just need the takeaways from this. As primary sources, no newspapers, no books. I know that's hard for a lot of people being like, well, I got into this from a book. Well, where did the book get that information? Is it making it up or is it based in research? You can still quote books and things like that if you want, but it's not going to count towards that accreditation. Magazine articles are a no-no, websites are a no-no, blogs are a no-no. They aren't going to count towards that requirement. If you cite them, you might want to also cite the primary source where they're getting that information, and always in sort of APA format. The other thing is it's kind of nice to have graphics. If your research has it, you can pull those into your slide. And ultimately, if you're not sure where to find your alma mater, wherever you got your degree, may actually give you lifetime membership. I know that mine did, which was very nice, and I went to a few different schools as well, and they all provide lifetime membership. And the nice thing about that is the librarians there also oftentimes are more than happy to be able to help you with your research. Google Scholar is a good, quick alternative, even if it has good and bad research on there and doesn't really differentiate. It'll help you find anything and everything. The other aspect to that is that it makes it really easy to get citations using that as well. So you can see all the different types of questions and then the research I have. And what's really good sort of etiquette for that is not to read all the material you have on these slides because they can get kind of beefy. Hopefully your people that you're teaching to know how to read. Just give them the good summary, the things that you want them to take out of it. That's about all there is to it. After that, you kind of get to this piece that's the conclusion. And this is where you kind of hammer home all this different information. You really want to make sure that they are able to take something away from this. From here, you're going to have just a couple of sentences, one thing that they hope they remember a year from now. Because honestly, like, it'd be great if they remembered everything a year from now, but they probably aren't. So in other words, what's one thing that they can help remember or take with them to the rest of their team or their practice? So you can kind of see my example there as well. And lastly, a conclusion here. So this has a thank you and lets them know that this is sort of the end, and that's where the clock stops, if that makes sense. Anything after this doesn't count towards the actual clock hours for the course, and it is concluded, which is why you could say and share things, is sort of my example slide, about links to books, other pieces of research, other tools or handouts, things like that. That's you can talk about that, but it can't count towards those licensure hours. So that's why we have that conclusion before the further resources. So my example, I have a book, that just an example, but you can have books, articles, websites, links, any and everything that you want as further resources, especially since this course is probably going to be a shorter one anyway to begin with. One quick note on these references. The easiest way, Google doesn't always make it perfectly APA format, which I'll show you, but it gets close enough. If you just search for the research article name, it will always have it, even if it isn't linked to it, and you can just click that citation button to be able to copy and paste these in to make it clean looking, professional, things like that. So you can see how quick and easy it is to get all those pieces of research that would have been discussed in there. And you can see how recent a lot of them are. You know, nothing from this year or anything, but we're not talking about research from the 1990s, you know, from decades ago. And this is okay. Want people to be able to find other material, because oftentimes is the case. We have material that is available that goes into the topic more in depth, because these sort of CE courses are rather quick. And as a result, we want to help people find ways to be able to get more material in greater depth. So it's okay in this place, because we've already gotten past that conclusion slide to let people know where to find and how to get these free education courses available. If you're teaching and want to sell it, that is perfectly fine. But as Counselor's Choice Award, we do have some free ones to help draw people in that are usually more like these, you know, 1 or 2 hour ones that are sort of introductions to starting in a larger course. And now would be the last slide. That would be any questions if you're presenting it live. If you're just doing a chalk and talk or things like that, that would be just fine to be able to skip this slide altogether, since you wouldn't have an audience necessarily to be asking those questions. A quick note on that as well is that in the year that we live now, there is a lot more demand for these asynchronous courses. People don't want to have to take time off work or away from their clients to be able to take these CE courses, and much rather would watch a recorded one that they can watch during their no-shows or between clients, things like that. That offers a lot more flexibility. The downside, of course, is that it doesn't allow for as much interaction and questions, which is why I highly recommend putting in your contact information as well. Other questions that people often ask when saying, well, what do I pick as a topic? What are people going to watch? What are people, thirsty for in their education? And my answer to that is, you're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, what are you an expert in? What do you know the best? And the other question is, what do you want to teach? What do you wish people knew? Because the fact is, people most oftentimes pick courses that are the most fun to watch, enthusiastic, interesting, because this class that is really important to them but they fall asleep during is useless, right? So pick one that you're enthusiastic, energetic, and you know a lot about. That's more important. If you're worried about it not going to make a profit, it's not worth your time or things like that, if it's a subject that's too obscure, honestly, from what I've seen, and I've been doing this for many years, the classes that sell the best are the ones that you know and you are an expert in and you're enthusiastic to teach. Because a knowledgeable, boring teacher is going to teach a lot less than an enthusiastic one that really wants to be there. So just got to keep that in mind as well. Here's sort of my example. Leo DeBrockett Counselor's Choice Award is that last and final slide. That's all there is to it. It's really that simple and that easy. I made this particular course in between clients, essentially, and there wasn't really much to it besides that. Actually recording and getting it done, answering those common questions, it's easy. I just hit record, do a little bit, stop hitting recording, and we're good from there. Some other sort of things to keep in mind for the requirement: once you have the recording done, we also need a course description, copies of any handouts, obviously something like this PowerPoint, and a post-test with 10 questions as a minimum, but then for every additional hour, it's going to be another 5 questions. So for example, if it's 2 hours, that's 15 questions. If it's 1 hour, that's 10. If it's 1.5, it's 13 questions. And your licensure information, your professional headshot, just a good picture that we can be able to put up on the website. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Other questions that come up a lot is, how do I record this? The easy, simplest way: you pull up Zoom. There's a record button. It'll download to your computer, and you're done. Like, that's it. Google Meet has the same feature. I'm using this free OBS Studio right now at this very moment because it has this nice green screen effect. And I've got a $5 green screen behind me, literally. It's obviously not the best green screen ever, but like it's just makes it that much easier to record this material rather than having to pull up Zoom. And you can record yourself. That's option number 1. Option number 2, if you don't want to deal with all that, meet with a member of our team, contact us, we'll schedule a time, and we'll handle all the recording. We'll probably meet over Google Meet or Zoom, and we'll record the session ourselves so that you don't have to worry about any of that, and you get an audience, because sometimes it's really hard to teach to a wall, like I'm doing right now. It's not nearly as much fun as well. So feel free to contact us about recording that way, or find someone who's maybe a grad student. There's lots of people who'd be more than happy and willing to get a free course, a personalized free course with you, to be able to get information and questions. And if we actually have a list of graduate students ourselves who are always happy and willing to be able to get extra learning and free material as well. So there's lots of options there. Not to say these are the only options, but these are the most popular ones for these quick interview and question type classes as well. If you have any questions, and for real, please reach out to us at counselorschoiceaward.com. My name was Leo DeBrock, and I really do appreciate all the time and energy you're putting in to be able to consider whether you want to help improve the world of mental health counseling by improving the quality of the continuing education that other providers have. Thanks again for your time. You guys take care.